Whether it was your wedding or a wedding you attended, what is the worst behavior you've seen from a wedding guest? At my friend's wedding, one of her friends ended up proposing to his girlfriend. Best way to take attention from the bride and groom and put it onto yourself. Kinda ruined the bride's day. My step-grandmother wore her wedding dress to my mom's wedding. Maid of honor sister of the bride spent 20 minutes talking about how nerdy the groom was, how she and all her friends couldn't believe when they started dating, mentioned going home with a new guy every week, brought up how her mom and dad didn't like his parents for some ducking reason. She was underage and clearly drunk at a dry wedding. Which, WTF. Best man managed to salvage the situation by delivering literally the best man speech I've ever heard. Edit. A few people asking what made the speech great. I posted this as a reply way down this thread, but here it is. The best man was the bride's brother, who had been friends with the groom for a long time, and he mentioned how he had noticed that the groom always respected every woman he dated. The best man had known that his sister had always fancied the groom, so when they started dating he had no qualms about whether his friend would be good to his sister. There were some appropriate jokes the kind brothers would share, some anecdotes, but it was mostly about how the groom had always been the best man's brother and now they were truly brothers. And he invited us to toast with iced tea or lemonade or an Arnie Palmer, their union. It was a good speech, but it was made even better by the train wreck of a speech that had come before. It faced mother of the groom, who actually stood up when the preacher said speak now. The father dragged her out with her kicking and screaming, literally kicking and screaming at him. While she slurred her words, she yelled and screamed all of the way out the door until more family got her subdued and took her home. She was pissed because her son was marrying a Leo girl. Literal 5 minutes before our wedding ceremony started, my aunt came up to me, the bride, and told me that my grandfather had cancer and mostly a few months to live. I had not known, but seeing him that morning I saw that he was not well. My parents and sister had, unnecessarily, kept it from me before the wedding. Auntie Dearest just waltzed up to me and said, if I were you I would not be so happy. Did you not know that your grandfather is dying? I cannot remember, but apparently I replied, well, let me get married first and then we'll take care of this. At my brother's wedding his bride's ex-husband showed up uninvited, drunk, and several of us had to escort him quickly out of the church since it was obvious he came to ruin the ceremony. My wedding. Drunk ducker of a co-worker swiped his finger through our wedding cake for a taste before we even cut it. I've told this story before but never tire of it because it still pisses me off. I was a bridesmaid for my college BFF's wedding. She was engaged to a guy whose parents had always been Catholic, but suddenly got super serious about it a few years prior. This including having a real wedding in a Catholic church after they'd been married 25 years, because their original wedding had been at City Hall. These parents were initially thrilled about the engagement, until bride and groom said they would be having the wedding at a campground, not in a Catholic church. They put a lot of pressure on the couple to change their minds, but they didn't budge. The father eventually said he would not be attending, and refused to let the groom's younger brother be ring bearer. The mom, however, said she would go, even if she didn't agree with it. When we got to the campground, all arrangements were made with the idea that the groom's mother would be there, including who would walk her to her seat, where she'd sit at the reception, etc. There's no cell reception at this campground, and the only phone line is at the camp office. About an hour before the wedding, the phone rang endlessly until one of the groomsmen was able to reach it, and heard the groom's dad say put the groom on the phone. The groom answered, and his father said, your mother will not be attending your wedding, because this is an abomination. Click. I was with the bride when she found out about this. She was bawling angry, rage-filled tears until about 10 minutes before the wedding was supposed to start. Mill tried to hijack the photographer to take the pictures she wanted. I warned the photographer beforehand she would do this, and he had mine and the bride's full permission to verbally slap her down if need be. He did, brutally. I tipped him, well. 1. Mentioned this story in a previous thread. I photographed a wedding back in 2015, wherein during his speech at the reception, the best man inadvertently revealed to the 200+ guests that the bride was pregnant. Up until that point, Only a very select few people knew. The look of pure age shock embarrassment she gave him was staggering. 2. Many moons ago, I was a guest at a wedding, and during the reception, one of the bridesmaids got so pissy drunk that she bum-rushed a very full men's room to see what was happening and to take a piss in one of the commodes. I presume she had to be helped out of the men's room. Source: the bridesmaid is my wife. A wedding planner told me this story. Apparently right before the wedding, the planner found the maid of honor passed out with prescription bottles all over. She had tried to kill herself right before the ceremony. They had to call an ambulance and get her out of there. Planner did this all without the bride noticing. Bride later asked the planner where her mom went and they told her that she went home sick. Bride found out the day after her wedding. Edit. Just to add some more info, the planner talked and handled this situation with the rest of the wedding party and all bride's parents. She wasn't just making the call herself not to tell the bride. The planner, bride's friends and family probably came to an agreement. Also, this is California where weddings probably range from $30 to $100 K. Unless that wedding took place in someone's home backyard etc, but from what I can recall, it didn't. I also believe bride and groom's parents paid for the wedding. My uncle waved a knife around drunkenly ranting in Chinese, then threw a microphone at the wedding cake. Edit. I was told to mention the fact that the microphone was successfully embedded into the cake. Great aim for a drunk man. My wife's and my wedding didn't have too much drama. No kids allowed. It was started explicitly on the invitation. We wanted everyone to have a good time and to leave the kids at home. All of our friends knew, understood and appreciated the opportunity to cut loose. Everyone except the wife of one of my wife's friend from high school. We really want to bring little what's her name. She's quiet. Nope. No kids. Are you sure? We've never been to Atlanta and we'd love to bring her with us. Nope. No kids. No exceptions. Well, guess who brought their kid with them to Atlanta? One of my wife's other friends tipped us off because they were in the same hotel. So, we got a hold of them and told them she couldn't come. But we bought a really cute dress and we don't have a sitter. She can wear it in the hotel room while you send your husband to the wedding. To his credit, her friend had tried over and over again to convince his wife to leave the kid at home with his mom, but she thought she could force the issue. Instead, she got to buy a dress to hang out in a hotel room with her daughter. Not too outrageous, but at one of my best friend's wedding, his drunk co-worker tried to duck literally everyone there. Tried to make out with a bunch of his married friends, male and female. Grinded on the 80-year-old grandmother in a wheelchair. Pulled random family members into grindy dances. It was really awkward and everyone rejected her advances. Oh, and did I mention she had her husband there too? He basically just sat in a chair drinking beer watching like he'd seen it a million times. Seemed like a real decent guy too. I felt bad for him. Worst at my own wedding was just a drunk girlfriend of a friend doing stripper moves in a short dress on underwear. But that was possibly the most popular event at the wedding, so no harm done. Friend of my wife's wedding. My first clue that there would be shenanigans was the bar for the reception. It was an outdoor wedding, so the couple had rented a tent, in one corner of which the bar was placed. Above the bar was a sizable neon Bud Light sign. Now, this wouldn't strike me as funny if the wedding was at a club or something that generally has a dedicated bar, but it is a bit humorous that somebody willfully said the wedding needed a neon sign in a tent, and actively ran an extension cord to run it. But I digress. During the reception, I observed one individual who was clearly very intoxicated and trying to dance with every woman there. The redneckishness of the whole scene got to me, and I leaned over to my wife and whispered, "I bet you $5 a fight breaks out." She hushed me and scowled that I would make such a suggestion at a joyous occasion. 10 minutes later, the drunk guy must have hit on the wrong woman, cause the next thing you know, some guy had picked up a metal folding chair and railed the drunk into next Tuesday, WWE style. I looked over to my wife, smiled, and said, "Called it." My drunken 19-year-old cousin stole the camcorder being used to make the wedding video, took it into the bathroom and proceeded to pleasure himself on camera. No one knew until we all, the whole family, sat down to watch it a few weeks later. The minister. Garden ceremony. He decided he should do a sermon on marriage, with a heavy-handed emphasis on how women should submit to their husbands. I was minding the music in the back, and it was all I could do to keep from heaving a speaker at him. Then he got all wound up in his own bullet, forgot about the bride and groom standing in front of him, and decided that now was the time to issue an altar call for all those who wanted to come up right now and receive Jesus into their lives. The only one who responded was the lady who owned the venue. She marched right up the aisle and spoke to him in an angry whisper that everyone could hear. No altar call. Finish the ceremony. No more sermons. Gotta love the minister's reaction. He got all butthurt and pouty. Finished up the ceremony in a monotone. Signed the license and huffed off. As the bride and groom departed at a friend's wedding, I heard another guest say, well, that was a lot of money to spend for an inevitable divorce. What a crappy thing to say. At a wedding where the reception was a potluck and the bride and groom were vegan, there was an open mic for friends of the bride and groom to say stuff. One of their friends said they always put secret lard into all of the vegan dishes they made, including the one they brought for the wedding potluck. Booed out of the wedding. I've seen a few terrible guests before, one at my own wedding included, but the worst was a woman at my cousin's, the bride's, wedding just this year. The woman was a +1 that came with one of the groom's family, not in a relationship with them, just a friend, and as far as I know didn't know the happy couple very well. It started off in the church. She cried quite loudly to the point people were actually turning to look at her. After the actual ceremony we were informed that she was widowed early last year. Fair enough. Though I did wonder why she'd put herself in such a highly emotional situation for people she barely knew. But each to their own. Then came the dinner, rather tipsy from the pre-dinner cocktails whilst the wedding party did their photos. She stood up to make her own speech. The wedding itself was a fairly relaxed affair, so although a little odd no one stopped her. She tearfully wished the bride and groom all the best because you never know when you can be ripped apart from the one you love. First dance for the bride and groom was cut short as the song reminded the widow of her dearly departed. Father-daughter dance also caused a scene because her daughter would never be able to do that with her father. Generally it just brought the whole mood crashing down, and it felt like we were all treading on eggshells. She stole attention from the couple's big day and got a ton of sympathy from all the guests. I felt for her. Losing her husband had to have been awful, but she essentially ruined someone's wedding, and no one was going to be the arsehole to call her out on it. My dad got it-faced drunk at my sister's wedding and ended up pissing in a pot plant in front of 1,000 guests. Edit. IDK if it was actually 1,000 guests. It was too many to fit in the ceremony and most people showed up for the reception instead, which is where the incident happened. Edit 2. I'm Australian and we say pot plants instead of potted plants. Sorry for the confusion. I wish it was an actual pot plant LMAO. My dream wedding will have that. Sets up lawn chair. Pulls cooler over. Gets comfy. I love these kinds of threads. I don't know what it is, but wedding horror stories are just the best. My sister's wedding immediately comes to mind. Our youngest brother, 18 at the time, was drinking at the open bar. No big deal. Venue owner just asks that he doesn't take any drinks outside. My brother does just that. He got absolutely trashed in the parking lot and the venue owner threatened to call the cops after warning him more than once. I guess he figured if he couldn't continue drinking, he'd invite his drug dealer friend to the reception and get high instead. The cops were eventually called, so he and his dealer friend take all the food they can manage to carry from the buffet table and flee. At least it wasn't a boring night. So, I don't know if this exactly counts, but the worst behavior I've ever seen at a wedding was my own. I was 3-4 years old and I was the ring bearer at my favorite aunt's wedding. Well, apparently, I carried the rings up and I got tired of standing around during the ceremony. So what's a kid to do? I put the pillow down, laid down on the pillow, took a nap. My uncle walked up to me on the dance floor at my wedding and handed me a small envelope. There's not much in here, but this is for you. Don't tell your husband you have it, and when you get divorced in a few years, call me and I will send you more. Then he turned and walked away. My wife's grandmother managed to insult every member of my immediate family and several other guests before the wedding even started. I refuse to speak to her to this day. My wedding BTW. Forgot to mention this wasn't like a one thing she did that insulted everyone. She managed to do it individually person by person, without much effort on her part. A specialized snowflake like insults all around. Not a bad thing but very memorable. My brother got married in a Catholic church. He had 5 groomsmen. The priest hated when a phone went off and would embarrass the person if it happened during mass. Anyway, a phone goes off. He glares at all the groomsmen. They are furiously checking pockets. The groom is checking. The congregation is all checking, all in a panic. Then the priest reaches under his robe and pulls out his phone and promptly shuts it off. The place went crazy. I got 2. 1. At my best friend's wedding, a mutual friend of ours brought her obnoxious boyfriend as her date. He's an attention whore who dances wildly, think it's funny. Tried to repeatedly start a slow clap. He had to be told not to stand on chairs 3 times. He tried to break dance and knocked over the bride's mother. 2. At the reception for my cousin's wedding while he was off getting drunk off his ass, his new wife's garter belt thingy slipped down. His best man bent down to help her fix it because she couldn't reach it easily. My cousin came back thinking that his best friend was trying to screw his wife and started a fight. I'm not sure if it counts. I felt bad for everyone involved at the time. Now I think it's funny. Also, when it came time to do the cake feeding thing, he fed her with the cake server and cut open the corners of her mouth. The butterflies my friend released at her wedding refused to fly away and instead landed on guests and members of the wedding party. They just sat there, flapping their wings slowly and lazily, enjoying the confusion they caused. I work security for a popular hotel chain. A week ago we had a wedding. The hotel I work at has a glass elevator, and one of the guests decided it was a good idea to pull his D out, riding the elevator, and point his junk at a family walking by. The family included a 9-year-old boy. So yeah, he also made the mistake of going into his room while the family still watched. I was invited as a +1 to a wedding where the bride and groom were both in polygamous relationships. When it came to speeches, they each invited another partner upstage. The bride's partner talked about how they met and gave examples of how she was a great person. He also talked about how he was friends with the groom and he was great too. Then the groom's partner got up. She talked about how they met at a party, fell in love and that their relationship was really special. Not one word about the bride. The groom was just sitting at his chair giggling and beaming at partner number 2. He got up and went to kiss her on stage. There were some people staring in surprise and on one particular table, his side of the family, they were really cringing in embarrassment. A friend of mine who is Indian has a family business where they run a few shops and gas stations. Yes, they are paddles. On the day of his wedding his future mother-in-law itched him and his family out because he didn't work in the morning at one of his stores. You know, like on the day of his wedding he chose not to work behind the counter for once. Her logic was, how will he be a good husband to my precious daughter if he can't even handle his business? Obviously this caused a huge shitstorm which probably was even deeper than I understood because of their culture and customs. The wedding did proceed, but the entire magic of the occasion was pretty much ruined. With time I lost touch with my friend, but word on the street is that his wife and mother-in-law are riding him like a cash cow. Sad. Buddy's wedding day. He and his groomsmen are taking a bit of liquid courage outside the church right before the ceremony, and a cop comes into view. One of the groomsmen, perhaps pro-gaming too much, flips off and starts mouthing off to the cop, and the cop busts him for drunk in public open containers, etc. Takes the offending groomsman to the station. Mind you, not the rest of the guys drinking on the sidewalk, just the one who felt like taking it to the next level. And the ceremony keeps getting delayed and delayed, an hour and a half, so that the groom can bail out his pal, just to have him there for the ceremony. My husband's crazy aunt, who was married at the time, took off with our DJ at the end of the night. We had to field a bunch of calls from her husband asking where she was and when she was coming home. Essentially, she went missing for a week after our wedding while she was with our DJ. So awkward. Tiny wedding with fewer than 20 guests and the groom's sister, who is 37 mind you, did her damnedest to make it all about her. Highlights. Itching about how the wedding wasn't catered and that we weren't going directly to the reception to get food. Photographs take time. Outdoor wedding in the afternoon. At a park. Of course we're going to take photos. Decided to swoon on a park bench while photos were being taken so that she and her family weren't in most of the photos. Because they were fawning over her. This lasted at least 20 minutes. Not sure why she didn't find food or seek medical attention. If it was so bad. We were a 5-minute walk from an abundance of food options. Somehow made it the bride and groom's fault she didn't eat breakfast or lunch. Little blame was placed. Itch please, no one told you not to eat and you knew the wedding wasn't catered, and when dinner was. Took food from the groom's plate at dinner without permission because she regretted her choice of meals. Itched that the bride and groom got special desserts. There was cake in abundance for all. The chef kindly sent out special treats for the newlyweds. Stole half from her brother. Whined to the bride as well for some of hers. Whined to parents that it wasn't fair. Haven't been to many weddings. So this is not as impressive as some itchows I'm seeing here. The transparent entitlement and envy were on full display throughout the event and it just never let up. There were so few people that she really did take up all the attention with her constant complaining and need for attention. My dad was really bossy at mine and it annoyed me. Nothing extreme. But Jesus, it was frustrating. He tried telling my Phil what to do. Who wasn't having any of it. They showed up 3 hours late for family pictures and then he tried to pull me away from my dinner to take pictures on the deck because they had all missed their chance. I told him no. Pictures were at 2 p.m. They didn't show up until 5 p.m. and I would make time for pictures when I could. But I ordered this food from a restaurant I actually like to eat at. So I'm going to eat my ducking food. A similar level of bad. My wife's family, only my girlfriend at the time, were invited to a wedding and she brought me along. Her parents were pissed and made more than a few scenes away from the rehearsal dinner and actual wedding about how I was only there to shove it in their face that their daughter had decided to be a lesbian. She's not. She's bi. Wasn't necessarily a guess, but in a way I was that person. It was, I believe, 6th grade-ish. I was going to my friend's house one day who lived about a block away. Now his dog, Birch, was notorious for escaping. I was about 2 houses down and I saw the dog running full tilt through the front yard and across the street. I ran after him only to be able to get a hold of him after someone grabbed him. I'll get to how someone grabbed him in a second. So after I saw the dog I went running after him. Turns out there was a wedding taking place a couple houses down. The dog picked the perfect time to escape as he ran down the aisle with the bride during the outside wedding. I yelled someone grab that dog, and the groom caught him for me. I told my friend the story and it's still something we both talk about. Beautiful day. Blue sky etc. Waterfront estate. Large gardens and flowers. Ceremony under rose pergola. Real organ plays wedding march. Bride and groom fully decked out. Saying their vows. Out of nowhere. The family bulldog wanders over, sits down beside them, vows still in progress, probably 300 people watching, and proceeds to noisily lick his balls. My sides hurt afterwards as I was laughing so hard, after the nuptials of course. Honorable mention for things I've heard about goes to my mom's brothers putting bets on how long her first marriage would last during the reception. I mean, they were right, but still rude. Posted this before. Attended a wedding for a young couple. She was maybe 95 pounds. Just a little lady. A guy friend of the bride and groom thought it would be funny to throw a big, full water balloon at the bride. Instead of rice, he chucked it from across the patio. It nailed her in the face, but didn't burst. It just ricocheted off her dome. She started crying loudly. It was horrible. Guest flirting with the bride. Drunkenly of course too. So too touchy and hilariously obvious. I wasn't actually at this wedding. I ducked out of it with the excuse that I had to work. Technically true. I just didn't mention the fact that I could have easily gotten a few days off if I tried. Because my cousin is a crazy vegan hipster and I didn't want any part of that. Fortunately, my parents brought back all the juicy details. Skipping over the reasons why the wedding blew and was insane. I'll get to the guest behavior issue. I should mention first that my cousin was the bride in this scenario. Well, the priest announced the couple after marrying them and it was then revealed that the couple was taking her name. Unusual, but whatever. Well, apparently, the groom's parents hadn't been told about this. They immediately got out and left in a huff, and most people didn't see them again before everyone left the hotel area everyone was staying the next day. That's pretty bad behavior. Though arguably worse was a little while later when they sent the groom a package which contained a bunch of photos of him from throughout his life and all of his baby clothes. Shredded.